The dust of the Western Trail still clung to Faith Barrett's skirts as she stood before the imposing ranch house, her threadbare carpetbag clutched in white-knuckled fingers. The year was 1879, and the promise of work had brought her to the Double Crown Ranch in the Arizona Territory, a desperate gamble for a woman with nothing left to lose after the fever took her parents in St. Louis just months before. Faith took a deep breath, steeling herself before raising her hand to knock on the weathered oak door. The sound echoed through what she imagined was a spacious interior. After what seemed like an eternity, the door swung open to reveal a man with broad shoulders and a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh western sun. "Miss Barrett." His voice was deep but not unkind, his eyes evaluating her with a practiced gaze. Faith nodded, trying to appear more confident than she felt. "Yes, sir, Faith Barrett. I've come about the position for a housekeeper." "Patrick Prescott," he introduced himself, stepping aside to let her in. "Owner of the Double Crown, come on in, you've had a long journey, I expect." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly well appointed, with solid furniture and touches that spoke of care and attention, a far cry from the rough bunkhouses she'd glimpsed on her journey west. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott," Faith said, stepping inside and removing her bonnet. Her chestnut hair was tied back in a practical bun, though a few tendrils had escaped during her journey. "Pa, is that the new lady?" a boy's voice called out, followed by the sound of footsteps thundering down the stairs. A moment later, a boy of about 10 appeared, his dark hair tousled and his clothes bearing the evidence of a day spent in boyish pursuits. His eyes widened at the sight of Faith, curiosity evident in his expression. "This is my son, Timothy," Patrick explained, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Tim, mind your manners and say hello to Miss Barrett." "Hello, Miss Barrett," Timothy said, his eyes still wide with interest. "Are you going to be our new maid, if your father decides to hire me?" "Yes," Faith replied with a small smile. Timothy tilted his head, studying her. "You've come a long way, from back east," Faith nodded. "From St. Louis." "That's mighty far," Timothy said, impressed. "Why'd you come all this way?" "Timothy," Patrick admonished gently. "That's not polite to ask." Faith shook her head. "It's all right, Mr. Prescott. I came because I needed work, and there wasn't much for me back home anymore." Timothy seemed to consider this answer before a smile broke across his face. "Well, I'm glad you're here." Mrs. Holloway was old and never smiled. She smelled like mothballs. Faith couldn't help the laugh that escaped her lips at the boy's candid assessment. Timothy's eyes lit up at the sound. He turned to his father, tugging at his sleeve. "She laughs nice, Pa. Can she stay?" Patrick's expression softened as he looked from his son to Faith, whose cheeks had colored at the unexpected compliment. "Well, son, that's a mighty fine recommendation, but Miss Barrett and I still need to discuss the particulars of the position." Faith's heart warmed at the interaction between father and son. She hadn't expected such welcome after the long, lonely journey west. "I'd be happy to discuss the position now, Mr. Prescott," Faith offered. "I assure you I'm a hard worker." Patrick nodded. "Let's get you settled first. You must be tired from your journey. Timothy, show Miss Barrett to the guest room upstairs. I'll have Rosa bring up some water so you can freshen up." "Yes, sir," Timothy said eagerly, already reaching for Faith's carpetbag. "I can carry that for you, Miss Barrett." "That's very kind of you, Timothy," Faith said, reluctantly relinquishing her bag. As she followed the energetic boy up the stairs, Faith caught Patrick watching them, a thoughtful expression on his face. For the first time since leaving St. Louis, she felt a flutter of hope that perhaps this place could become more than just employment, it could become a home. The room Timothy led her to was simple but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small dresser. A window overlooked the sprawling ranch lands, golden in the late afternoon sun. "This will be your room," Timothy announced proudly. "It's next to mine. Pa's room is at the end of the hall." "It's lovely," Faith said, genuinely pleased with the accommodations. "Rosa will bring you water soon," Timothy said, placing her carpetbag on the bed. "She's our cook. She makes the best apple pie in the territory." "I look forward to meeting her," Faith replied. Timothy lingered, clearly bursting with questions. Miss Barrett, do you know any stories? Mrs. Holloway never told stories. Faith smiled. I know quite a few stories. Perhaps, if your father approves, I could tell you one before bed sometime. Timothy's face lit up. Really, Pa tries, but he always falls asleep before the ending. Faith laughed again, and Timothy grinned in response. See, you do laugh nice. I told Pa. A knock at the door interrupted them, and a plump woman with dark hair streaked with gray entered, carrying a pitcher of water. Ah, you must be Miss Barrett, she said, her accent hinting at her Mexican heritage. I am Rosa. Welcome to Double Crown. Thank you, Rosa, Faith said warmly. It's nice to meet you. Timothy, your father wants you downstairs, Rosa said, giving the boy a pointed look. Miss Barrett needs to rest. Timothy reluctantly headed for the door. I'll see you at supper, Miss Barrett. After Rosa and Timothy left, Faith sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. She had come west with nothing but hope and determination, and now found herself in a household that seemed, at first glance, far more welcoming than she had dared to dream. Downstairs, Patrick poured himself a small measure of whiskey, thinking about the young woman who had arrived on his doorstep. When he'd placed the advertisement for a housekeeper, he hadn't expected someone so young or so refined. Faith Barrett clearly came from genteel stock despite her current circumstances. Pa, Timothy's voice interrupted his thoughts. Is Miss Barrett going to stay? Patrick looked at his son, noting the hopeful expression on his face. We'll see, son. I need to make sure she can handle the work. I think she can, Timothy said confidently. And she knows stories, Pa. She said she might tell me one before bed. Patrick raised an eyebrow. Did she now? Well, that would be something, wouldn't it? Ever since his wife Charlotte had died 5 years ago, Patrick had done his best to raise Timothy alone. Mrs. Holloway had helped with the house and cooking until her arthritis became too painful, but she had never connected with Timothy the way Charlotte had. The boy needed more than just someone to keep house. He needed a maternal influence. I like her, Pa, Timothy said simply. Patrick ruffled his son's hair. I can see that, Tim. Let's give her a chance, shall we? When Faith came down for supper an hour later, dressed in a simple blue dress that had seen better days but was clean and pressed, Patrick found himself noticing the graceful way she moved and the quiet dignity she carried despite her obvious reduced circumstances. Miss Barrett, please join us, Patrick said, standing as she entered the dining room. Rosa has prepared a welcome supper. Faith smiled, taking the seat Patrick pulled out for her. Thank you, Mr. Prescott. This is very kind. It's the least we could do after your long journey, Patrick replied. Timothy tells me you've offered to share stories with him. Faith's cheeks colored slightly. If that's acceptable to you, sir, I wouldn't want to overstep. Not at all, Patrick assured her. Timothy's mother used to tell him stories every night. It's something he's missed. A shadow crossed Faith's face. I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Prescott. Patrick nodded, appreciating her directness. It's been 5 years now. Timothy was just 5 when Charlotte passed. That's very young to lose a mother, Faith said softly, her eyes full of compassion. Timothy, oblivious to the emotional undercurrents, piped up, Miss Barrett, did you ever have to fight off bandits on your way here? Faith laughed, the sound brightening the room. No, thankfully. The stagecoach driver was quite formidable. I don't think any bandits would have dared. As supper progressed, Patrick found himself increasingly impressed with Faith. She was well-spoken but not pretentious, and she engaged Timothy with genuine interest in his tales of ranch life. By the time Rosa served apple pie for dessert, Timothy was completely smitten with their new arrival. Miss Barrett, Patrick said as they finished their meal, I'd like to discuss the particulars of the position if you're not too tired. Of course, Faith replied. I'm eager to begin earning my keep. Timothy, time for bed, Patrick instructed. Miss Barrett and I need to talk business. But Pa, Timothy began to protest. No arguments, son. It's already past your bedtime. Timothy sighed dramatically but stood from the table. Good night, Pa. Good night, Miss Barrett. Will you tell me a story tomorrow night? Faith glanced at Patrick, who gave a slight nod. I'd be happy to, Timothy. Sleep well. After Timothy had gone upstairs, Patrick led Faith to his study, a room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk. Please sit down, Patrick said, gesturing to a chair before seating himself behind the desk. First, let me be clear about what I'm looking for. The Double Crown is a working ranch. We're not fancy folk, but I do try to maintain certain standards, especially for Timothy's sake. Faith nodded. I understand, sir. The position involves keeping the house clean, helping Rosa with meals, mending, and looking after Timothy when I'm busy with ranch business, Patrick continued. It's not easy work, but it's honest. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Prescott, Faith assured him. And I'm quite handy with a needle. Patrick studied her for a moment. May I ask about your circumstances, Miss Barrett? You don't seem like the typical applicant for a housekeeping position. Faith's hands tightened in her lap, but her gaze remained steady. My parents died of fever 6 months ago. My father was a bookkeeper, but he had debts I wasn't aware of. Once they were paid, there was nothing left. I worked as a shopgirl for a time, but she hesitated. The owner's son was overly familiar. When I refused his advances, I lost my position. Patrick's expression darkened. I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Barrett. Faith lifted her chin. I decided then that I needed a fresh start. The advertisement for a position out west seemed like Providence. Well, Providence or not, you're here now, Patrick said. And based on what I've seen today, I'd like to offer you the position. Room and board plus $10 a month. Is that acceptable? Relief washed over Faith's face. Yes, Mr. Prescott, that's more than fair, thank you. Good, Patrick said, standing. You can start tomorrow. Rosa will show you around the house in the morning. As Faith rose to leave, Patrick added, and Miss Barrett, Timothy was right. You do have a nice laugh. It's good to hear laughter in this house again. Faith's cheeks colored prettily. Thank you, Mr. Prescott. Good night. As she left the study, Patrick found himself watching her go, a strange feeling stirring in his chest. It had been a long time since he'd noticed such things about a woman. Charlotte had been gone 5 years, and while there had been opportunities ranch owners weren't exactly in short supply in the territory, none had captured his interest. Faith Barrett, with her quiet dignity and gentle laugh, was different. Patrick shook his head, dismissing the thought. She was his employee, nothing more. And yet, as he poured himself another small measure of whiskey, he couldn't help but wonder what changes her presence might bring to the Double Crown. Over the next few weeks, Faith settled into life at the Double Crown with surprising ease. She proved to be efficient and thorough in her work, transforming the ranch house with her attention to detail. Rooms that had seemed merely functional now felt more like a home, with fresh flowers from the garden and curtains that had been languishing in a trunk now hanging at the windows. Timothy adored her, following her around like a shadow whenever he wasn't in school or helping with ranch chores. True to her word, Faith told him stories each night, weaving tales of knights and dragons, pioneers and adventurers that left the boy spellbound. Patrick found himself looking forward to evenings at home in a way he hadn't for years. After Timothy was in bed, he and Faith would often sit in the parlor, she with her mending and he with ranch accounts or a book. They spoke of books they had read, of Timothy's education, of the ranch's prospects. Faith proved to be an excellent listener and surprisingly knowledgeable about a wide range of subjects. One evening in early June, about a month after Faith's arrival, Patrick returned from a long day of working with the cattle to find her in the garden, gathering the last of the spring flowers before the summer heat made them scarce. Good evening, Miss Barrett, he called, removing his hat as he approached. Faith looked up, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Mr. Prescott, you're back earlier than expected. The work went faster than anticipated, Patrick replied, noticing how the golden light caught in her hair, highlighting strands of copper and gold he hadn't noticed before. Those flowers are lovely. Faith smiled, looking down at the small bouquet in her hands. They won't last much longer with the summer coming on. I thought I'd bring some inside while we still can. Charlotte loved flowers, Patrick said, surprising himself with the admission. He rarely spoke of his late wife. She tried to grow roses, but they didn't take well to our soil. Faith's expression softened. Perhaps we could try again. I read in a gardening book that roses need special care in desert soil, but it's possible with the right amendments. Patrick asked, noting her use of the word. Faith blushed, realizing her presumption. I'm sorry, I meant no, Patrick interrupted gently. I like the sound of that, we is good. A moment of understanding passed between them, something undefined but profound. Faith was the first to look away, her cheeks still flushed. Timothy is waiting for you, she said. He wants to show you the model ship he's been working on. Patrick nodded, reluctant to break the moment but knowing he should. I'll go in then, don't stay out too long, the mosquitoes will be fierce once the sun sets. As Patrick walked back to the house, he found himself thinking about Faith in a way that both troubled and excited him. She was his employee, a young woman who depended on him for her livelihood. It wouldn't be right to pursue any sort of relationship beyond employer and housekeeper. And yet, there was something about Faith Barrett that called to him, something that made him want to know her better, to see her smile, to hear her laugh. Inside, Timothy was waiting impatiently, his model ship proudly displayed on the dining table. Pa, look what I made. Miss Barrett helped me with the sails. Patrick examined the model, genuinely impressed by his son's craftsmanship. This is excellent work, Tim. You've got a good eye for detail. Miss Barrett says I could be a shipwright if I wanted, Timothy said proudly. Though I told her I'd rather be a rancher like you. Patrick ruffled his son's hair. You've got plenty of time to decide. Where did you learn about ships anyway? Miss Barrett has a book about them, Timothy explained. She's teaching me all sorts of things, Pa. Did you know she can do sums faster than my teacher? Patrick raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Timothy nodded enthusiastically. She helped me with my arithmetic yesterday. She says numbers are like puzzles, and once you know the tricks, they're easy to solve. Your Miss Barrett is full of surprises, Patrick murmured. She's not my Miss Barrett, Timothy corrected. She's ours. The innocent statement struck Patrick deeply. In just a month, Faith had become an integral part of their small family unit. He wondered if she felt it too, this sense of belonging that had developed so naturally. When Faith entered the house a few minutes later, her arms full of flowers, Patrick found himself watching her as she moved efficiently around the dining room, arranging the blooms in a vase with artistic care. Those look nice, he commented. Faith glanced up, a smile lighting her face. Thank you, I thought they might brighten up the table. They do, Patrick agreed. Everything's brighter since you came. The words slipped out before he could stop them, and Faith's eyes widened slightly in surprise. For a moment, neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken possibility. Pa, Timothy's voice broke the spell, can Miss Barrett come with us to the Independence Day celebration in town next week? Everyone's going to be there. Patrick looked at his son, then back at Faith. Would you like to join us, Miss Barrett? It's nothing fancy, but the town puts on a decent celebration. Faith's smile was like sunrise. I'd like that very much, Mr. Prescott. The town of Silverdale wasn't large, but on Independence Day, it seemed as if every rancher, miner, and homesteader for 50 miles had converged on the main street. Bunting in red, white, and blue decorated the storefronts, and tables laden with food lined the street. Faith wore her best dress for the occasion, a blue calico that she had carefully mended and adorned with a new white collar she had made herself. Patrick, dressed in his Sunday best, found himself stealing glances at her throughout the morning as they watched the parade and listened to the mayor's speech. Timothy darted through the crowd, playing with the other ranch children, returning occasionally to check in or to drag Faith off to see some new wonder. He's quite taken with you, Patrick observed as they watched Timothy compete in a sack race. I've never seen him attach himself to anyone so quickly. Faith's expression was wistful as she watched the boy. He's a wonderful child, Mr. Prescott. You've done a fine job raising him on your own. I've done my best, Patrick said, but there are things a boy needs that I can't provide. A woman's perspective, a mother's touch. Faith turned to look at him, something unreadable in her eyes. Are you considering remarrying, Mr. Prescott? The directness of her question caught Patrick off guard. I haven't given it much thought until recently, he admitted. Faith nodded, her gaze returning to the children's games. Timothy deserves a mother who will love him as her own. Yes, Patrick agreed, watching her profile. He does. The afternoon progressed with games, music, and dancing. When the fiddlers struck up a lively tune, Patrick surprised himself by turning to Faith. "Would you care to dance, Miss Barrett?" Faith hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'd be delighted, Mr. Prescott, though I should warn you I'm not very practiced." "Neither am I," Patrick admitted with a smile. "We can be unpracticed together." As they joined the other dancers, Patrick was acutely aware of Faith's hand in his, of the warmth of her waist beneath his other hand. They moved together with surprising grace, and when Faith laughed at a misstep, the sound went straight to Patrick's heart. "You're a natural, Miss Barrett," he said as they circled each other. "You're very kind, Mr. Prescott," she replied, her cheeks flushed with exertion and pleasure. When the dance ended, Patrick was reluctant to release her hand. "Would you like some lemonade? It's getting warm." Faith nodded, and they made their way to the refreshment table where Timothy found them, his face smudged with what appeared to be pie. "Pa, Miss Barrett." "Did you see me win the sack race?" he asked excitedly. "We did," Faith assured him, pulling a handkerchief from her pocket to wipe his face. "You were magnificent. Miss Barrett, Billy Thompson wants to know if you're Pa's sweetheart," Timothy announced, causing both adults to freeze. "Timothy," Patrick began, embarrassment coloring his tone. "I told him you weren't," Timothy continued, oblivious to their discomfort. "But that you should be, because you make Pa smile again." Faith's face flamed, and she busied herself with wiping a non-existent spot from Timothy's cheek. "Timothy, that's not a proper thing to say." "Why not?" Timothy asked, genuinely confused. "Don't you like Pa?" "Timothy, that's enough," Patrick said firmly. "Go find Billy and tell him to mind his own business." As Timothy ran off, Patrick turned to Faith, mortification evident in his expression. "I apologize for my son's lack of discretion, Miss Barrett. Children say the most inappropriate things." Faith shook her head, her blush still evident. "There's no need to apologize, Mr. Prescott." Children are naturally curious. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when the mayor announced the start of the pie-eating contest. Patrick cleared his throat. "Would you like to watch the contest? Timothy's been talking about it all week." Faith nodded, grateful for the change of subject. "Yes, I'd like that." As they walked toward the contest area, Patrick's hand brushed against Faith's, a brief touch that sent a jolt through both of them. Neither acknowledged it, but Patrick found himself wondering what Faith would say if he were to ask her the question Timothy had so artlessly raised. Was it too soon? Would she think he was taking advantage of her position? Would she feel obligated to accept because he was her employer? These questions plagued Patrick throughout the remainder of the celebration. By the time they headed home in the wagon, with Timothy fast asleep between them, exhausted from the day's excitement, Patrick had resolved to proceed with caution. Faith Barrett was too important to both him and Timothy to risk frightening her away with hasty declarations. What he didn't know was that Faith was harboring similar thoughts, wondering if the warmth in Patrick's eyes when he looked at her was merely friendliness or something more, and whether she dared hope for a future that included not just employment at the Double Crown, but a place in the family that had come to mean so much to her. The summer heat intensified as July progressed, bringing with it the seasonal challenges of ranch life. A particularly dry spell had Patrick worried about water for the cattle, and he spent long days riding the range, checking stock ponds and planning for the possibility of moving the herd if conditions worsened. Faith, meanwhile, kept the household running smoothly, preserving the garden's bounty for the winter months and ensuring that Timothy kept up with his summer reading and arithmetic even while school was out. One evening in late July, a thunderstorm rolled in from the mountains, bringing much-needed rain but also violent winds that tore a section of roof from the barn. Patrick and the ranch hands worked through the night to secure the animals and make temporary repairs. Faith stayed up as well, keeping coffee brewing and food ready for the men as they came in, soaked and exhausted for brief respites from the storm. It was nearly dawn when Patrick finally stumbled into the house, his clothes plastered to his body and his face gray with fatigue. "Mr. Prescott." Faith exclaimed, hurrying to meet him with a towel. "You're soaked through, you'll catch your death." Patrick accepted the towel gratefully, too tired to protest as Faith helped him remove his sodden coat. The barn's secure for now. We'll need to do proper repairs once the storm passes. Sit down before you fall down, Faith instructed, guiding him to a chair by the kitchen fire. I'll bring you some coffee and something to eat. Patrick sank into the chair, the warmth of the fire beginning to penetrate his chilled bones. You should be asleep, Miss Barrett. It's not your job to wait up all night. Faith busied herself pouring coffee. I couldn't sleep knowing you were out in that storm. Besides, Rosa needed help with feeding the men. She placed a steaming mug in his hands and a plate of food on the small table beside him. Eat. You need your strength. Patrick looked up at her, struck by the concern in her eyes. You're a remarkable woman, Faith Barrett. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it hung between them, a bridge crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Faith's lips parted in surprise, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she said softly, "And you're a remarkable man, Patrick Prescott." The use of his own given name, spoken in her gentle voice, warmed Patrick more than the fire or coffee ever could. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the barriers of employer and employee crumbling in the quiet intimacy of the early morning hour. "Faith," Patrick began, setting aside his coffee, "I've been wanting to talk to you about something." Faith's expression was a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Yes." Before Patrick could continue, the kitchen door burst open and one of the ranch hands rushed in. "Boss, lightning hit the south pasture. The grass is on fire." Patrick was on his feet instantly, exhaustion forgotten. "Get the men. We need to contain it before it spreads." He turned to Faith, regret in his eyes. "I have to go." Faith nodded, already moving to prepare more coffee and food for the men. "Be careful." Patrick paused at the door, looking back at her. "We'll finish our conversation later." The fire in the south pasture kept Patrick and his men busy for 2 days, fighting to protect the grazing land and the cattle from the flames. When he finally returned to the ranch house, he was so exhausted that he slept for nearly 24 hours straight. By the time he emerged from his bedroom, the moment for the conversation he had begun with Faith seemed to have passed. They returned to their usual roles, though there was a new awareness between them, a current of unspoken possibility that charged even the most mundane interactions. August brought the county fair, and Timothy was determined to enter his best calf in the livestock competition. Patrick spent hours helping his son prepare the animal, while Faith sewed Timothy a new shirt for the occasion. The fair was a 3-day affair, with ranchers and farmers from across the county gathering to compete, trade, and socialize. Patrick had reserved rooms at the hotel in the county seat for himself, Timothy, and Faith, an arrangement that raised a few eyebrows among the more gossip-prone members of the community. "People will talk," Faith warned him as they prepared to leave. A single man traveling with his housekeeper. Patrick's expression was determined. "Let them talk. You're Timothy's companion as much as our housekeeper, and he wants you there for his big moment." Faith's heart warmed at his words, but she remained concerned. "Your reputation is secure enough to withstand a little gossip," Patrick interrupted. "Unless you're uncomfortable with the arrangement," Faith shook her head. "No, not at all. I just don't want to cause problems for you." Patrick's expression softened. "You've caused nothing but happiness since you arrived at the Double Crown, Faith. I won't let small-minded gossip change that." The use of her given name, now occurring with increasing frequency, still sent a thrill through Faith. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "Very well, then. I suppose we should finish packing." The county fair was a whirlwind of activity. Timothy's calf won second place in its category, a triumph that had the boy bursting with pride. Patrick watched with satisfaction as his son accepted the ribbon, standing tall and speaking clearly to the judges as Faith had coached him. "He did wonderfully," Faith murmured, standing beside Patrick as they watched Timothy lead his calf back to the holding pen. "Thanks to you," Patrick replied. "You've been so good for him, Faith." Faith shook her head. "He's a bright boy, he just needed a little confidence." "It's more than that," Patrick insisted. "You've given him something I couldn't understanding, patience, a different perspective. He's flourishing because of you." Faith's eyes shimmered with emotion. He's easy to love. The word hung between them, charged with meaning. Patrick's gaze intensified, and he took a step closer to her. Faith, Miss Barrett. Timothy's excited voice cut through the moment as he ran toward them, ribbon clutched in his hand. Did you see? Second place. Patrick swallowed whatever he had been about to say, turning to his son with a forced smile. We saw, son. We're very proud of you. As Timothy regaled them with details of the judging, Patrick caught Faith's eye over the boy's head. The look they exchanged held promise, a conversation postponed, not canceled. That evening, after Timothy had fallen asleep in the hotel room he shared with his father, Patrick knocked softly on the connecting door to Faith's room. Faith opened it, already dressed in her nightgown and wrapper, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, more vulnerable, and Patrick's heart tightened at the sight. I'm sorry to disturb you so late, he said, his voice low to avoid waking Timothy. But we keep getting interrupted, and I need to speak with you. Faith nodded, stepping back to allow him into her room. Is something wrong? Patrick shook his head, closing the door softly behind him. No, nothing's wrong. In fact, everything has been right since you came to the Double Crown. Faith's breath caught at the intensity in his voice. Mr. Prescott, Patrick, he corrected gently. Please, Faith. We're beyond formalities, aren't we? Faith nodded, her hands twisting nervously in the fabric of her wrapper. Patrick took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Faith, I've wanted to have this conversation for weeks now. I find myself thinking about you constantly. When you're in the room, I can't look away from you. When you're not, I'm counting the minutes until you return. Faith's eyes widened, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. Patrick, please let me finish, Patrick said, taking a step closer to her. I know this might seem sudden or inappropriate given our current arrangement. If you don't feel the same way, I'll understand completely and nothing will change at the Double Crown. You'll always have a place there, regardless. Faith's eyes filled with tears. And if I do feel the same way. Patrick's heart leaped at her words. Do you, Faith? Do you feel what I feel? Faith nodded, a tear spilling down her cheek. Yes, from almost the first moment, though I tried to tell myself it was foolish, that you could never see me as anything but an employee. Patrick closed the distance between them, gently wiping away her tear with his thumb. You've never been just an employee to me, Faith. Never. His hand lingered on her cheek, and Faith leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the tenderness of the gesture. Timothy said I make you smile again, she whispered. Patrick's own smile was gentle. You do. You've brought light back into our home, Faith, into my life. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Patrick lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Faith responded with a shy eagerness that made Patrick's heart soar. When they parted, both were breathless and Patrick rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Faith Barrett, he said simply. I want you to stay at the Double Crown not as our housekeeper but as my wife. As Timothy's mother, if you'll have us. Fresh tears spilled from Faith's eyes, but her smile was radiant. Yes, I'll have you both. I love you, Patrick, and I love Timothy as if he were my own. Patrick gathered her into his arms, holding her close as if he feared she might disappear. My son was right that first day. You do laugh nice, and I'm so grateful he asked if you could stay. Faith's laugh was muffled against his chest. So am I, so very grateful. Their wedding took place in October, when the aspens in the high country turned gold and the air held the first crispness of autumn. It was a simple ceremony in the small church in Silverdale, attended by friends and neighbors who had watched their relationship blossom over the summer months. Timothy stood proudly beside his father, serving as best man despite being only 10. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, the boy's whoop of joy echoed through the church, causing laughter to ripple through the congregation. At the small reception held at the Double Crown afterward, Timothy raised his glass of lemonade for a toast. To my pa and my new ma, he said, his young voice clear and confident. I knew from the first day that Miss Barrett laughed nice that she belonged with us, and now she's staying forever. As Patrick and Faith shared a loving glance, both knew that the journey that had brought them together, Faith's desperate gamble on a new life in the West, Patrick's advertisement for a housekeeper, and Timothy's innocent observation about a pretty laugh had been guided by something greater than chance. Under the vast western sky, on the land Patrick had worked so hard to build into a home, they had found not just employment or companionship, but a love that would sustain them through all the seasons to come. And when their daughter was born the following summer, with Faith's chestnut hair and Patrick's determined chin, Timothy declared her laugh was nice too, just like their mother's, a musical sound that filled the Double Crown Ranch with joy for many years to come.